good guidance of where they should be going next. You need more practice in balancing chemical equations. You need to get practice in solving quadratic equations. And this is a very good book that I would recommend. So study that chapter and do those problems at the end. So some sort of thing. The days are gone when the professor can say, I don't know what a first class honours is, but I know it when I see it. Those days are gone. They've gone with the great dictators. Because now, with the Bologna process, everything is open. All our work is under scrutiny. It is like Bologna is like opening the windows of the stuffy room and fresh air coming in. It's bringing universities into the modern era. So we need to get used to having our work assessed. For people who teach in a high school, we are very used to it, because inspectors will come and they'll sit in the back of the class. And when I was being trained as a teacher, the professor would arrive. I would not know he was going to arrive. And he would just arrive and sit in on my lessons. So we need to get used to being assessed ourselves, and we need to get used to justifying our marks to our students. Now, as a help to you, if you list out the learning outcomes, 7 or 8 learning outcomes for your module, check if you have variety in your assessment by using this grid. So, if one of your learning outcomes is describe, say, events that took place in history, that might be done by a written exam. But if students have to investigate the factors that affect the rate of the chemical reaction, that might best be done by giving them a project. And if they have to demonstrate good presentation skills, that's a presentation. And this is coming in quite rapidly into our assessment. One of my nephews recently took his degree in electronic engineering. And as part of his assessment, he had to do a project, and then he had to present the project to the rest of the class. And that presentation was worth 10% of his overall marks. And he worked very hard for that 10%. And I use presentations also with all my student teachers, where they do a project and then they present it to the rest of the class. So if all the ticks are in one column, that is bad. We need to have a spread of ticks along to reflect the various modes of assessment. So as I said, rubrics can be very helpful. Rubrics are a sort of grading tool. Now let me give you an example. This is one of the learning outcomes that I use in my Masters in Science Education. This is a course that I teach for Master's students. And these students, well, they're not students really, they are teachers. They are teachers who have been out teaching, fully qualified teachers. And they come in to me at night and on Saturdays to do a master's degree. So this is one of the learning outcomes. Summaries evidence to support the development of a line argument. Now, if the student, the teacher who comes into me, has done this, say they might have looked at the literature review on the role of laboratory practical work, and there might be something like 15 top papers that I would expect them to quote. So if they have between 12 and 15 of those top papers, I would be very impressed. I would describe them as outstanding if they've synthesized those 12 to 15. Now, some students might have synthesized maybe between 9 and 12 of them. And on a a very good job. So they'd be second class honours for grade 1. Other students might only have done perhaps 6 of them, and they'd be lower down. And some of them might have only done 3 or 4, and very poor sentences. So if somebody comes into my office and asks me, why did I only get a mark of 55%? Well, when I marked that assignment, I would put just a tick box in one of these, because that is the impression that I would have got from it. So a rubric can help us to zoom in on a mark that we will allocate to the student. Now, this morning, we looked at aims and objectives, and we looked over here at learning outcomes. And we saw that these were all written by an active verb, and that aims and objectives are written using words like know and understand and be familiar with. But of course, as one would expect, the two are very closely related. As teachers at university, we would all hope that we are teaching for understanding, that we're giving an understanding to our students in the classroom. But if we have written the learning outcomes for our course, if we are clear in our minds about what these students should be achieving, then these learning outcomes will help us to be better teachers. So feedback from the students' learning outcomes into how we prepare our lectures, we set up this dynamic equilibrium. A dynamic equilibrium in chemistry, for example, is where you have two chemicals and one is always changing into the other non-stop. You cannot separate one from the other. And likewise, the teacher-centered approach and the student-centered approach are put into dynamic equilibrium by means of learning outcomes. Because with learning outcomes, you're always feeding back into your teaching. Particularly when we assess the learning outcomes. Because sometimes we find when we mark an assignment or look at a project that some of the students have missed the point completely. And if a lot of students have missed the point completely, then it suggests to us that we have to improve our teaching to help these students reach the standard. So sometimes you hear criticism of Bologna, and you hear people saying, oh, Bologna is all about now a paradigm shift, that we forget about all the teaching and we just concentrate on what the students learn. That is not what Bologna is all about. We will always need our good teachers. We always need our professors who are experts in their subject and who know how to teach it. And some of the best teachers I have ever encountered have been people at university. Outstanding, brilliant people. And when I was at university in first year, the Department of Chemistry had a very clever idea. They put all the best teachers, the best professors into first year. And they instilled in us a love of chemistry. And then, like the Pied Piper, we followed them to do our degree in chemistry. Whereas some of the other departments, the teachers were not so good in first year. They kept the good professors for the fourth years, but that was their mistake. They should have put the good professors in the first year to lead the students into their subject. So, I mentioned this morning that there were 2 books that everybody should have, every professor should have in their office. One was by Paul Ramsden, and the other one It's by John Biggs. Details of these two books are given at the end of the first presentation. After the Bible slide, there's a big long list of references there. Now, John Biggs wrote a very good book. And it ties into something that Paul Ramsden wrote. He said that the assessment has to mirror the learning outcomes, since as far as the student is concerned, the assessment is the curriculum. And that from the student's point of view, assessment always defines the actual curriculum. Now, John Biggs, in his book, had a very nice diagram. He said very often the teacher and the student are on two parallel tracks. Here we are, a teacher. Before the long one, we just had objectives and aims describing our goals. Now we have learning outcomes, so we go from objectives to learning outcomes. Then we, as teachers at university, engage in various activities, and then at the end, we assess our students. But, says John Biggs, that's not how the students look at it. The students start with the assessment. Tell us what we must do to pass the exam, and we do it. Isn't that right? Students are saying the word over. They start with the assessment. And so John Biggs says that's where we should be starting also. If we make it clear from the word go what the assessment involves and link them to the learning outcomes, then we will succeed in getting students to achieve the learning outcomes. So John Biggs says we have to link up these two parallel tracks. Start with the assessment, then engage in the learning and teaching activities here to achieve the learning outcomes. And he puts it very well in his book. He says, to the teacher, assessment is at the end of the teaching learning sequence, but to the students, it's at the beginning. And he says, if the curriculum is reflected in the assessment, as shown by the downward arrow, then the teaching activities of the teacher and the learner activities of the learner are both directed towards the same goal. So, starting with the assessment, making clear to the students what the learning outcomes are, is key to getting the students to achieve those learning outcomes. Now, he refers to a topic called constructive learning. Now, I don't like using jargon, but this is a term that is used quite a lot in the field of education, particularly with learning outcomes. Basically, constructive alignment involves you lining up three things. And if you can think of the three corners of the triangle, you have the learning outcomes, you have the teaching and learning activities, and you have the assessment. And what constructive alignment means is that these three items are coordinated. That the learning outcomes are linked with the teaching and learning. So you teach and you get students engaged in learning to achieve those learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are also linked with assessment, so that you assess the students in such a way that the assessment is linked with the learning outcomes. So if you think of the three corners of a triangle, you're doing very well. Marston and Murray, in their book, say that constructive alignment is really joining the dots. You're linking up the learning outcomes, the teaching and learning activities, and the assessment, you're linking all three. And when all three are linked up in your module, then you're fully compliant with Bologna and you have very good practice in your module design. To make sure that you have this constructive alignment, firstly, you define the learning outcomes, as we did this morning. Then you see what's the best way to teach in order to achieve these learning outcomes. And what are the best learning activities to give the students, projects or worksheets or whatever, to achieve the learning outcomes. Then, how are you going to assess? What mode of assessment? A mixture of maybe multiple choice questions, a mixture of terminal examinations, a mixture of project presentations, or whatever. And finally, then you do a double check on assessing the learning outcomes to see did they match what you wanted them to match. If we look at the three things we have to link together, these are the three things: learning outcomes, teaching learning activities, and the assessment. We saw in our first talk this morning, learning outcomes are divided into these three categories. If you were to list out all the teaching and learning activities at university, that would be a good start. And then if you look at all of the ways you could assess at university, there's a list of a whole range of assessment techniques. Now, I want to show you a module that I teach. This is a module for second year. The students are second year BSc in Science Education. And in this module, the students attend lectures with me, but they also spend 6 weeks of teaching in a school to get experience of teaching, to see if they like teaching, and to find out, what it's like to be in a classroom with 25 or 30 kids at high school level. Now, these are the learning outcomes in cognitive, affective, psychomotor. In the cognitive domain, they have to attend lectures and tutorials, and they also have to observe and experience science teacher teaching. Now, in the assessment then, they have a written exam and they produce a portfolio of lesson plans. So, the written exam allows me to check that they know the literature on what a good quality science teaching is in the books they read and in the papers that they read. Okay, and the portfolio of lesson plans, I pick that up and I examine it to see are they preparing their lessons to a high standard. So I link those three together. The cognitive domain is always easy to assess. Now we come to a problem. The affective domain. The affective domain, as we learned this morning, is all about attitudes. How do we give a mark for attitudes? Very difficult. In the affective domain, I'm asking them to display willingness to cooperate and to also help out in peer-assisted learning. Listen to this report. Display a willingness to cooperate. I'm trying to find out when these student teachers go into schools, do they relate well with the other members of the staff? Do they dress appropriately? Do they wear a collar and tie? Do they behave in a professional manner when dealing with their colleagues and with the students? Now, I can only judge that by getting a report from the teacher in charge. Were they in class in time? when they left the laboratory, did they leave everything nice and neat and tidy? Were they taking their job seriously? Or did they leave the laboratory as if a bomb had gone off in the place? This is hard to put a mark in the affected domain, but it can be done. And so the report from the school mental wellness and also peer-assisted learning, I can check did they turn up to give the sessions, were they professional, did they have the material prepared, and so on. In other words, did they have the right attitude? Did they show enthusiasm and a positive response to the questions that the students gave? Now, the psychomotor domain demonstrates good classroom presentation skills. When I leave my house every morning, I don't go to the university. I go to the local schools where my students are teaching. And I turn up at the school to meet my students. And I say, good morning, I'm here to supervise your lesson. And they're always so happy to see me arriving at the class to supervise their lesson. So I come in and I sit at the back of the class. I just say to the students who are sitting, the pupils, I just say, I'm here to see how they are getting on. I don't say I'm here to supervise the poor student teacher. But I sit at the back of the class because this is the only way that I know that I'll be able to assess the presentation skills. I'm able to see, do the students come with the lesson prepared? Are they able to control a class? Are they good at questioning the students? Do they have worksheets for the students? Do they mark the whole?